Presentation of the 2014 series of ALCTS webinars on MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. I'm Pamela Blue, your host for today's session. This afternoon, I am delighted to introduce Sarah Bordak, whose presentation is entitled Libraries and MOOCs, Roles, Opportunities, Pitfalls. Sarah has an MA in Educational Technology from Pepperdine University and received her MLIS from Simmons College. As head of Instructional Design for the Brown University Library, Sarah supports the Media and Information Literacy curriculum in undergraduate teaching and learning. Drawing on her skills as a librarian, instructional designer, and educational technologist in museum, library, and higher education environments, Sarah will share some of her experiences as a team member responsible for the development of Brown's first 3 MOOCs for the Coursera platform. Using the question box on your screen, please submit your questions at any time. Sarah will pause during her presentation to respond. Today's presentation will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to all attendees shortly after the conclusion of the program, together with a copy of the presentation slides. If there was insufficient time to answer all the questions, Sarah has kindly offered to respond in writing to those that could not be answered during the webinar. Sarah's presentation includes animation and a link to a YouTube video. Loading the video may take a moment. And now, as I turn the program over to Sarah, there may be a slight delay.
Okay. Hi. I'm excited to be here today to talk with you about libraries and MOOCs. For the next 40 minutes, you will learn about some of the issues and opportunities that MOOCs present for libraries. I will share with you my experiences with work on the Coursera platform, developing MOOCs at Brown University, and I'll try to draw the lines between the hype of MOOCs and the real work that goes on to develop them. My 3 key points today are that libraries do have a role in support of and even delivery of MOOCs. Number 2, the second point, is that many of the skills necessary to develop MOOCs are easy to find in libraries already. Many librarians have these skills. And third, that while there are many opportunities presented by MOOCs, there are also downsides. Also, I hope to not talk at you for the whole time we're together this afternoon. So this little icon here at the bottom of this screen is my cue to you that you have to do something. There'll be some polls and some other questions along the way. So as Pamela mentioned, we'll take a break about 20 minutes in, and so if you have any questions, feel free to just type those into the chat box, and we'll answer them as we go. At the end, we'll also have time for questions. So we'll start out with a poll. So let me just get this up. Here we go. So the poll is, the question for you is, has your library been involved in the development of MOOCs? I see you guys are all voting. That's great. Okay, one more second, and then I'm going to close the poll. And share the results. So some of you have been involved in the development of MOOCs, but the majority of you are either curious or you're involved in things getting started. Thank you for your feedback. It looks like we have a range of experience. And just knowing a bit about you helps me as the presenter, but it is also hopefully of interest to you to learn about your fellow participants. And as we move through, we'll talk a little bit about how this type of tool is actually a part of MOOC development. So hide those results. Okay, great. So you should see my slides at this point. Excuse me. My experience is with the Coursera platform and with the courses developed at Brown University. There are many platforms and models out there, such as MOOCs created on the Canvas network for high school students, and MOOCs created on Moodle for professional development. The focus of my presentation today draws on my experience with Coursera at an academic setting, but I hope that the lessons lend themselves to many of these other situations. So in September 2012, Brown became a part of the wave of universities developing MOOC content. And as MOOCs became a household term in 2012, Brown decided to join in, and it felt a little, or it felt a lot, like swimming upstream. We were scrambling quite a bit to just figure out what this meant and what we needed to get the work done. As I said, Brown's first work with MOOCs began in September 2012. Brown had run online courses as part of its pre-college program, but had not previously established a significant effort in online education. So there was no team in place to support the Coursera project. The first 3 MOOCs we developed were Archaeology's Dirty Little Secrets, taught by Sue Alcock, whose interest with teaching this class was to promote curiosity and interest in the field of archaeology, and it was intended to be an introductory class. This class has run twice, and the second time it ran in tandem with her on-campus face-to-face class that covered much of the same content. The second class was The Fiction of Relationship, taught by Professor Arnold Weinstein, who has taught a similar class face-to-face on campus for about 2 decades. And he wanted to transform it for this platform as an exemplar of comparative literature classes. And it posed a lot of interesting challenges that I'll touch on later in the presentation. And this course will run a second time in the fall, in September. The third class that we worked on was the Coding the Matrix, Linear Algebra, taught by Phil Klein, who teaches a similar class on campus and had also just written a textbook. And that has run once. And then there's a fourth class in development, Exploring Neural Data, that will also launch in September. Everything happened really quickly in the beginning. Courses were selected, teams were assembled, and deadlines were sketched out. Unlike most other things that happen at the university, this project started quickly, and we hit the ground running, and it wasn't planned ahead of time, and there was a lot of scrambling. And in talking with colleagues at other institutions, I think this story plays out on other campuses as well. In talking about these courses, it's critical to also talk about the professors. The team at Brown, which I'll talk about momentarily, was supporting their efforts to teach the classes that they wanted to teach, and we worked together as we all struggled to figure out what the best way or ways were to deliver the classes that they had hoped to teach. And that so there was partnership, but they were the content experts, and we were trying to solve a problem, a puzzle, in how to best support their efforts and to deliver the course the way they wanted it to be. So our team at Brown was made up of a number of different individuals, and it happened very quickly, as I said, but it does reflect the culture of the campus, and I think because of that it worked really well. We had the head of the Center for Teaching and Learning on campus leading the project. We had a representative from the Continuing Education Department, which is the group on campus that had developed some online courses before for the pre-high school or the high school to pre-college program. We had media support from the Media Production Services group in our IT department on campus, and then I represented the university library. The group, while on one hand it seems very practical, but it also brought together a multidisciplinary collaborative group. And at the same time that we were working on this project, there was also a strategic planning effort going on campus. And so what we were doing was also informing the strategic direction or interests of the campus for online learning. And so that was an interesting added, I don't know if it was a pressure, but it was definitely a presence in our thinking and what we were doing. So just to mention, Pamela gave a very wonderful and gracious introduction. Thank you, Pamela. I just wanted to share a few other details about my background that may help explain my relationship to the MOOC projects. I do work as a librarian at Brown. Before coming here, I worked as a curriculum developer and an educational technology consultant. And before that, worked in public broadcasting, TV production, and web development. So I came to the library with media, technology, and pedagogy in my background, and then I found that I pulled through on all three of those heavily in this project. But I think we all learned together a lot about a lot of these different concerns that go into MOOCs as we went along. So I have another interaction here. This isn't a poll. I just would like you to use the chat box, and in the chat box, thinking about what you know about MOOCs, I'd like to take a moment to hear from you about some of the services that libraries provide that might also support MOOCs. These may be services universally available at libraries, or it may be something that your institution offers. 1 second. Can everybody hear me okay? Just a quick check on the audio. Okay. Okay. So thank you. That's a lot of what the work that we do in libraries is completely relevant to the work that we do in MOOC development. This picture of mission control seems maybe a little exaggerated or a little complicated, but it we are constantly dealing with where does what the library does support our community or support the institutions and the, or in my case, the university that I work in. So balancing issues of the mission of the library and the mission of the, I'm sorry, I was just reading something on the screen here, and the missions of librarianship more generally. So when we think about MOOCs and we talk about copyright and ethics and equal access to content, all of these are tied closely to the world of MOOCs. So as we think about the relationship between libraries and MOOCs, let's take a look at something that I think we're all pretty familiar with in some form, the ALA Library Bill of Rights. And I've abridged this a little bit to highlight key phrases that I think relate to how MOOCs fit with library missions. First, we provide for the interest in information and enlightenment of all people. Libraries provide materials and information, challenge censorship, provide free expression and free access to ideas. Library users should not be denied access to information, and that we provide facilities for equitable access and use of our spaces. So when we look at MOOCs, Coursera's tagline is to provide education access to anyone, anytime, anywhere. We could talk for a while about the Coursera for-profit business model at this point, and how it promises some revenue generation for partner institutions. That is definitely a big topic. But for the purposes of our discussion today, I want to focus on the word open in massive open online courses. Now, massive is something we need to worry about. How can a library scale, and should a library scale, to support classes that may have tens of thousands, possibly 100,000 users? How could we possibly support that? And should we? Open is very much in line with what libraries do. Open provision of information, open access to it, open spaces. Online is something that is somewhat of a new territory for libraries. So as we think about whether we should be working with MOOCs, maybe we need to think a little bit about what is our infrastructure, what kind of support do we have to develop this kind of content. But when it comes to courses, public programs and instruction are also a core part of what libraries already do. So while we may not have all of the skills within our walls or our communities, we're already participating in many ways in this type of work. So when we think a little bit more generally about how MOOCs fit into library mission and existing services, this relates to what you shared in the chat box about what are some of the services that we provide. So I think that libraries are well poised for change, like disruptive change like MOOCs. We already have expertise in copyright, fair use, intellectual property, public domain, and Creative Commons materials, teaching and instructional design, digitized collections, virtual reference and chat services, and distance instruction, whether it's a research guide or passive information on web pages, or even more sophisticated distance learning. Copyright and fair use in particular are an area where libraries are particularly strong partners for MOOC development. Okay, so another quick poll here that I will put up. This one is just a very basic question. Have you taken a MOOC? And there are lots of different flavors here, and if your answer is other, please use the chat box to just submit what you mean by that, or with any of the other, if you want to comment on any of your other answers. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll and share. So quite a few of you have actually completed a MOOC, and it's really a wonderful thing, but a huge time commitment. I will be the first to acknowledge that. I have registered for dozens of MOOCs and participated in only a few, but fully participated. But participation is really the best way to appreciate the strengths and weaknesses of the platform as a teaching and outreach tool. I fully appreciate signing up for these, and especially the things that sound really interesting personally, and then when you get down to it and you realize this is 8 weeks of 5 to 10 hours a week outside of work, how am I going to possibly do that? But they have some different strengths and weaknesses, and it's interesting to learn about them if you do have the time. I'd like to shift now to talk about the content and teaching of a MOOC. First, you really have there's obviously a lot of planning. There are lots of different scenarios in which we teach, and a MOOC environment is no different. There are different platforms, partners, and audiences. So there is expertise needed not just in the content, but also in instructional design. And this is another area where, because librarians teach a lot. We may not have a deliberate instructional design model, but we do a lot of this work and we can help contribute to it. The first thing with instructional design is to consider learning objectives. What do you want your students to be able to do? This is a very basic question, but being able to pin down exactly what that is, 3 or 4 things that you want them to be able to do at the end of a class, at the end of a course, the end of an activity, helps to line up the instruction and the content for the rest of the course. The next thing to consider for instructional design is assessment. What will the students produce to demonstrate their understanding? How will you know that they are actually learning what you wanted them to learn, that they can do what you wanted them to do? And third, what activities and experiences will you provide that will allow students to provide you then with the evidence of their understanding? So the skills needed to do all of these elements may not come from one place, and that's where the team model is actually such a wonderful one for libraries to use. We are used to doing outreach and building partnerships, and this is no different. It's a great opportunity to form partnerships and also to build skills within your organization. And some of them may be there, they're just not part of the current work that the person does. It's something to explore. These skills include content development, presentation skills, visual communication, instructional design, media production, and I'd argue that these skills, the skills that are needed for a MOOC, are also 21st century professional skills that libraries need to embody. So if we don't have them, we don't necessarily need them just for a MOOC. We might need them for other work that we do. So at this point, if there are any questions, we'll take a little pause before I continue on with the rest of the content.
Sarah, there are a number of questions. I'll read them for you, and perhaps you can respond as best as you can. First question is, how many students registered for each class, and what percentage of them were of the same demographic as traditional college students?
Okay, that's a really great question. I'm flipping back to my notes so I can answer this. For the 3 classes, so the answer is different for each one. The purpose of the archaeology class was to promote, it was an introductory archaeology class, and there were students who were, there was a 10-year-old who was taking this class with his mother, and they did the class together, and then there were retirement age folks who were just interested in basic archaeology. The intention of the class was to be able to do archaeology in your backyard, essentially, wherever you are. So that was her intention. So I would say that the demographics were different between the Coursera class and what her class was face-to-face. But generally they were, I mean, the information from Coursera classes tends to be that participants have college degrees, and they have at least finished high school, and many of them have a bachelor's degree of some sort. And I think we did find some of that, but there's a huge spread of ages, at least. There were close to 30,000 people registered for that archaeology class, closer to 50,000 for the fiction of relationship, and 60,000 for the coding the matrix. The completion rate was much lower than that, significantly lower. As you know, I just said I registered for 24 MOOCs and haven't finished more than a few of them, but that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, because they didn't complete it, they may have been completely satisfied in what they got out of it. Like, I did all the activities, but I didn't participate in the final assessment. I did all of the readings, but I didn't participate in any discussions. So their satisfaction levels were higher than just the completion rates. In terms of the demographic question, the fiction of relationship, there were many people who were previous students who had taken this class at Brown, who found out about it and did take the class, and then there were other people who took it worldwide who were doing this almost like a book club, reading books in small groups as part of, it was a book a week throughout the program. So there was a variety in the demographics. It didn't mirror the Brown community.
Another question, Sarah. It seems to me that MOOCs are more suited for academic libraries. What advice would you provide for a public library aiming at placing itself as a reference information center, especially in a developing country?
Ooh, good question. Well, I do have an example in the second half of the presentation about how public libraries an example of how they can use a MOOC as part of their programming. There are also, I would say that in terms of the developing country aspect, the ability to bring presenters and content into the community in a public library setting could be significant. Thinking about not necessarily holding school in the library, but offering presentations and discussions that may help in a professional development type mode, or they may be for instruction. There's so much variety now available. Our attention goes to Coursera, but there are a lot of other, because they've got the largest library of courses or course catalog, but there are a lot of more boutique offerings, and I can't name any off the top of my head, but even NGOs are getting involved in MOOCs, and this is something I could follow up with after the presentation.
Okay, let me see. I think we have a couple of other things here. Somebody is asking about access to the textbook. For example, the course on coding the matrix. Was the textbook accessible to all registrants?
It's a great question, and the answer for coding the matrix is yes. The professor wrote the book and self-published the book, and he made it available to all participants, and that worked for him. But I'll also talk, when we're done with the question break, about other problems we had with the texts for the fiction of relationship.
And I guess this is more perhaps in the way of a comment rather than a question, but one of our attendees says, I think MOOCs are an important tool for learning and boosting research guidance. Don't you think that one of the best ways to have MOOCs achieve their objectives is to encourage libraries to have access to recorded sessions available to the interested public?
I would say yes, and being able to curate those in some form would be probably one of the, it would provide libraries with the ability to flexibly design learning objects around what their community needs. And there is a push for online learning object repositories, and Coursera and the other big platforms aren't really designed to be able to extract individual videos out of a course as they exist now. But I could see that being something that develops over time. And right now the big issues with Coursera are that it's an emerging, changing model. It's a business model, and universities are trying to figure out what this means for them. I mean, part of it is a branding issue, an identity issue, outreach, and also it's instruction. So a lot of the content right now is bundled together. I can see, though, that online learning object repositories will emerge with more of this multimedia content, which will then give libraries the ability to extract individual pieces that are made available through Creative Commons licenses or whatever, or even through licensing, and be able to create little instructional pieces for ourselves.
And just one comment from another attendee in answer to the question about MOOCs and public libraries, that there is a MOOC on public speaking that would make an excellent public library offering.
That's great.
And
Good,
I think maybe we should continue now with your presentation, and then we'll be happy to take additional questions at the end.
That sounds great. Yep. Okay. So let's see. So just to kind of wrap up the summary of opportunities, the title of this presentation included some of the pitfalls, so I have to speak to those in a moment. But more generally, the opportunities here for libraries and MOOCs are outreach, which we do a lot of anyway, and we can do it in new and different ways. Increased skills and within our community, and also broadened relationships and partnerships so that we can build those skills without actually having to hire new people. That there may be people in our communities that already may also be looking for partners. And so this idea of collaboration is key to the success of a MOOC. It is not like just teaching a class. It's so much more complicated, and it takes a lot of planning, and it's great to have partners to work with on that. So the pitfalls, and there are some. We've talked a lot about the opportunities and roles associated with libraries and MOOCs, but the elephant in the room, or one of the elephants, is a discussion about the downsides. So let's take the three-legged stool analogy. Libraries are always balancing between costs, time available, and the amount of work that needs to be done. As pressure is put on one of these three legs, the other two bear an increased burden. So MOOCs are not a practical or realistic time, cost, and resource investment for all libraries. Partners are great. Shared responsibilities are great. Targeting the support you give to a MOOC is great. There are many models. For example, if you've participated in the other webinars in this MOOC series, you may recall the February session, MOOCs and the Public Library, with Dorothy Pulaski of the Ridgefield, Connecticut Public Library. And she described how Ridgefield Public Library used a Coursera MOOC as part of a public program for adults. The course she used was The Fiction of Relationship, one of the courses I worked on, and then we'll talk a little bit more about. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the issues associated with the development of that course, but if you're interested, you should, if you have access to it, look back at that, that previous webinar. But she talked about how they use that class, the course, the Coursera course, as part of their adult summer reading program. So to talk about The Fiction of Relationship, it's an interesting case study for libraries. The course itself was focused on works of literature from the 18th century to contemporary time. The purpose is to apply literary criticism of these texts across conversations including history, economics, urban planning, politics, and the arts. Professor Weinstein had taught this class and similar classes, as I said, for a while, and wanted to take on the challenge of converting it to the Coursera platform. So the larger picture on the screen, on the right of the screen, is Edvard Munch's picture, and he image, and then it was used in our promotional video for the course, and we actually contracted out to make the promotional video. It was kind of a glitzy thing to make this 2-minute video, and the guy who produced it wanted to use audio, and the audio that he picked was a Philip Glass composition. So all of our copyright arms are going up in the air that we can't use a copyrighted image, a very famous one, and a copyrighted composition without getting the rights to them. So right out of the gate, we had copyright questions, and it was tied to the for-profit nature of Coursera's development and the fact that the library was making money. So not the library, the university has, the model is that if Coursera makes a lot of money off the class, which they don't, but they could, there's this for-profit relationship between the Coursera option and company and their partner institutions. So we had to consider what to do. We were able to, we bought a 5-year license from Artist Rights Society for the MOOC image, and then we got the synchronization rights for the glass composition as well. So we put out some money early on and realized this was not sustainable for us to do throughout the rest of our development of this course. These are the kinds of things that maybe would have been okay in a fair use context in a classroom setting, but here this was a promotional video and the intention was a little bit different. So we ended up deciding to license these 2 pieces, and that led to more, so we got started on the content for the course. The professor's vision for the course was to have 10 texts, and they were organized chronologically, loosely actually, and he wanted the students to read all of the texts, not excerpts. So right out of the gate, again, we have a problem. Google Books doesn't have full text for these, although there were bits and pieces. We looked at the Internet Archive and Project Gutenberg to see what was available, and we did find a number of them there. We looked at WorldCat availability for books to say, well, what if these are available in libraries, then which ones are more popular or less popular, more widely available? And then we also looked at, we used the copyright renewal database to find out which were in the public domain and which were not, which were still in, under copyright. So what we found was that half of the books were still under copyright. And that led us to a conversation with the professor. This was not just the team working in isolation. This was a combination of, this was the instructional design process. What we ended up doing was breaking the course in half. So there was Module 1 and Module 2. Module 1 was for all titles that we could provide open web links to. So those were the Project Gutenberg and Internet Archive texts. And you can see from the grayed out text, these are the older titles. And then this Module 2 were the texts here noted with a copyright symbol, and students were required to secure their own copies of the text. For some of these, that was going to be tricky. When we looked in WorldCat for the availability of Beloved, Toni Morrison's book, in China, we found 2 copies. And while that may not represent the full availability of the text, it was concerning that if the professor wanted the students to read every text in order to complete the class, we would be excluding certain students in certain areas from fully participating. So that's why the 2 modules were designed. And so this is, you can see, this is an access question. It's a copyright and ethical question. There are a lot of different pieces at work, and it made for some very interesting conversations. We made Module 2 supplementary. I don't know that this fully satisfied the professor's intention for the course, but this is the way he decided to run the class based on these restrictions. So one of the other texts that was a little tricky was the Ice Palace. The Ice Palace is a Norwegian text, and when we looked at the WorldCat records, we saw that there were only about 310 or so copies worldwide, and that was for all 19 editions: Norwegian, Swedish, English, Polish, Spanish, Turkish. And then on Amazon, we saw that there were minimal offers for new and used books, and then used ones were very expensive, $30 to $60 each. So we contacted the publisher, and this is where in the library I took on the role here of contacting the publisher, who was in the UK, and then the U.S. distributor, to make the case with the help of the faculty member that we could help them sell more of this somewhat obscure title to all of the people who had registered for the course. So we negotiated a discounted price for the ebook and physical copy when they had a code that we shared with participants in the class, and they could purchase it through the distributor's website and then ship around the world. So that was an interesting process, and it addressed the problem of access to the materials. So just to kind of round us out here at the end, the three key points that I wanted to cover very generally were, number one, that libraries do have a role in support of and even delivery of MOOCs. Number two, many of the skills necessary to develop MOOCs are easy to find in libraries. Librarians already have them. And three, that while there are many opportunities presented by MOOCs, there are also downsides. And if you haven't seen it already, the May issue of American Libraries has a brief point-counterpoint on the subject of MOOCs, which might be of interest. And there are lots of options to learn more. Some recent MOOCs that you might be interested in or to know about are the new Librarianship Masterclass taught by David Lanke from Syracuse. It's a Moodle course, and I think it was also delivered, maybe it moved from one platform to another, but the name of it is New Librarianship Masterclass. And then Jeffrey Pomerantz at UNC Chapel Hill has taught a class, Metadata, Organizing and Discovering Information. There are also some courses coming up on Coursera. There's a bioinformatics class from Johns Hopkins, and then Understanding Media and Understanding Google from Northwestern. That comes up at the end of starts at the end of this month. And there are lots of courses that you could just take for fun too. But so this is just to say that there's a space for library content as content in MOOCs, as well as just facilitating the development of MOOCs. So thank you so much for your interest and your attention today. We have time for a few questions.
Hi, Sarah. We'll give people, attendees, a chance to pose a few more questions. And in the meantime, I have a couple of questions for you. One is, based on what you were saying now about getting copyright permission and working with publishers, designing and developing a MOOC is not something that is a quick fix. How much lead time should people allow when they start planning something like this?
That's a great question. I think we had a somewhat luxurious development time in that we started in September and we launched in June. So, I mean, whatever that is, 9 months, it sounds great, but there was so much work to do, and that was for 3 classes. Some people in other schools, when they first did their first MOOCs, or in the early days of 2012, they did them within like 3 months. And I think to do them well, depending on how complicated, how many instructors you have, what the platform is, who has the expertise, do you have it, do you need to find it, it depends. Our classes were 8 to 12 weeks long, and we had 3 of them. If you were developing a new class to teach a university class, a 14-week class, you would need a couple of months to prepare that. So this is more complicated in that you have many other people that you need to rely and coordinate with. Mm-hmm. There's no easy answer.
We have a question. Has anyone offered a reference service like Question Point inside a MOOC?
I don't know, and I think that there's a role for that. My fear is the scalability question, and how, if you offer it, how do you actually deliver support for something on a massive level? We decided that we would have we would develop a research guide but only for public access content, but that we wouldn't provide any, this was for the anthropology class, but we wouldn't provide any actual staff support. But then again, it depends on the work that the students are doing. In the 3 classes we offered, we didn't have any research projects. So they may have been looking for open access content or public domain images, but they weren't going to be doing any of the more traditional research-based work we support.
Question about what were the challenges that you faced in developing the support model?
I think we were lucky in getting the right people together early on, but we didn't, the 4 people who were in that group, library, continuing education, Center for Teaching and Learning, and our media production people, the problem was really in actually getting the work done. When it comes to shooting videos for, let's say what you have an 8-week class, and let's just say that you have 6 videos per week. Somebody needs to plan those videos, shoot those videos, also light them. You need good lighting and good audio, and then somebody needs to edit them, and then the professor needs to review them. And there were a lot of pieces of that process that we didn't anticipate, and it wasn't anyone's fault. It's just that we didn't really know all of the steps, and on top of all of that, the Coursera platform was being developed while we were building the MOOCs, so some of the functionality changed while we were developing the course. So there were just a lot of moving parts.
Is that Coursera platform sort of a template-based thing that you fill in, or is the development of the MOOC content totally free-form?
It's pretty free-form in that you can put text and embed videos. The challenge we had was really mostly with the assessment part. For the fiction of relationship, there was a lot of writing that students had to do, and we were using the peer assessment tool within Coursera to so that we didn't have enough people to read all of their submissions. So with the peer assessment model, they look at each other's, they look at a couple of each other's writings and then give feedback. And that model didn't really work very well, and it also was a little bumpy on the platform side. So there are templates for things like polls and quizzes. One of the reasons why the computer science and science classes more generally do really well with the Coursera platform in particular is because you can do machine grading. And you can have multiple choice questions, and then the machine actually tells you whether you got it right or wrong. When you're looking at humanities type work or social sciences, but mostly with the humanities where people are writing and responding, you really need full participation from the professor, teaching assistants, peers, and the peer assessment piece becomes really important.
Sarah, are you aware of any other libraries that are as involved in this kind of development as Brown is?
There's a little bit of a different model at different schools. Some of the biggest early work for libraries in MOOCs came, well, there was a lot in at Duke and also at UPenn, but they had a little bit of a different development model, and they also had, I think, they were earlier enough to the game that they kind of saw the development as it was happening. I think that at Berkeley, they're using the edX model, and there the library is involved with MOOC development pretty significantly, and edX is actually looking as a platform. So edX is similar to Coursera in that it's a full platform, and they are looking at the role of libraries and MOOCs as some of the work that they're actually doing.
Good, thank you. We have some more questions coming in. Let me see if we can get you to answer them. A good 11-minute oh, this is a comment more perhaps. An 11-minute interview of Daphne Kohler co-founder of Coursera, on what led to the launching of Coursera was provided to a MOOC I'm currently taking on Python, and there's a link to that. A surprise to Daphne was how 100,000 students means many students crowdsource answers to other students' questions. Apparently, the average response to a student's questions is 21 minutes at any time of day or night.
Yeah, it's interesting. We did find that to be the case with the fiction of relationship class, where we had TAs and we had to worry about the peer assessment, but the discussion boards were so active, and students would often answer questions for other students before anyone else had a chance to get there. It was really impressive.
I guess we'll wait just a second longer to see if there are any other questions, and not hearing any, then we'll begin to wrap this up. Is there anything else? I don't see any more questions coming in. So I think we'll move to conclude our program today. And I wanted to thank you, Sarah, for what was really a very excellent description of the library's role in developing the MOOCs at Brown. I think from what you've told us, we should all be encouraged to use our skills as librarians to play a significant role in online learning on our campuses. You will soon be sent a brief survey about today's session, and we hope you will take a moment to respond to the survey. The ALCTS Continuing Education Committee is planning CE events for the fall of 2014 and the spring of next year, and welcomes suggestions, recommendations, and ideas for webinars and e-forums. In order to send us your suggestions, have a look at the ALCTS CE page on the web, part of the ALA website. And we are also offering a full complement of online courses throughout the summer. You'll see some of them mentioned on your screen. In addition, there are 2 virtual pre-conferences starting next week and the week after in the lead up to ALA Annual in Las Vegas. And now I just want to say thank you again to Sarah for explaining what is involved in developing and presenting a MOOC. It is a little bit intimidating, I think, but with some planning we might be able to jump into that. And I want to thank Iping Chen Gaffey and Aaron Boyd for providing technical support. Without their help, the MOOC would not have gone off as well as it did today. And we thank the members on behalf of the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee. We want to thank all of you for joining us. We wish you a good afternoon and a good summer, and we hope you'll join us again next year for some new webinars.